Hi, my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the founder and CEO of Third Stage Consulting Group. We're an independent digital transformation firm, and we help a lot of our clients implement SAP S/4HANA as well as other types of deployments as well. We also help our clients define their digital strategies, select software, address the organizational change side of things, provide quality assurance on their deployments, etc. So that's a bit about who we are. We're technology agnostic, but we do quite a bit in the world of SAP just because so many of our larger enterprises and multinational, multi-site organizations are, for one reason or another, going to S/4HANA. And I wanted to talk about some of the best practices and lessons that we've learned from these S/4HANA transformations so far from some of our more recent clients. And there's 5 of them I'm going to focus on today, but I could spend an hour giving you a list of 20 or 30 of them. But we're going to focus on the 5 that I think are more important, that our team has found to be most important in these types of deployments. So the first is to begin with a clear transformation readiness strategy. When we get excited about a new product like S/4HANA and all the cool stuff it can do, it's really easy to want to just dive right in, bring the system integrator in, and just start implementing stuff. And that's good that we've got that momentum, that excitement around it. That's good from a change management perspective. But we also want to be realistic and control the tempo and pace ourselves through this transformation, because the minute we get all the system integrators on site, the meter is running, they're charging by the hour, and we don't have a lot of time or budget to be making big decisions or getting our ducks in a row. So there's a lot around transformation readiness that we typically advise and help our clients through before the full system integrator team comes on board. And there's a lot of depth in this that I could spend a great deal of time talking about. In fact, there's other videos on my YouTube channel that talk about this in more detail. I've written a lot of blogs about this as well, a lot of articles and white papers. But just to summarize, we want to look at the people, the business process, the technology, the executive alignment. Those are the 4 major components we want to look at: people, business processes, technology, and executive alignment. Those are the 4 in no particular order that we want to make sure we've got our ducks in a row and our answers resolved prior to bringing the full team of system integrators on board. The reason for that is it's going to make your implementation that much more smoother, that much more less expensive, and that much less risky, because now we've have a clear game plan. We've got a clear blueprint that allows us to control the project rather than just letting the system integrator control the project. So it gives us a certain amount of ownership and control. We can set the tempo and the strategy for the overall transformation at this point. So again, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but it's a general best practice. I encourage you to go read or watch some of the videos or articles that I've published on this exact topic. The second thing is to clearly define your business processes before fully engaging with your system integrator. And this is actually one of the areas within the transformation readiness work streams that I mentioned a second ago. But we call it out as a separate best practice because it's something that starts during transformation readiness and continues throughout the transformation. Now, we're not suggesting that you map out all your future state business processes now before you bring on your system integrator. But what we are suggesting is you pick out those high value areas that are either your sources of competitive advantage, or they could be your really broken business processes that you know you really need to spend some time fixing before you start to put technology on top of that. Or it could just be something that is important to you as an organization. It's important to your future. Maybe you're in an industry that's being disrupted, like retail or publishing, and you know there's certain aspects of your business model you really need to figure out and fix now so that you don't just pave the cow paths, so to speak, by bringing in S/4HANA and automating with a really cool software, just automating these broken, inefficient processes. So figure out what our operating model is. We map out those business processes, those high value areas, those areas of big impact to the organization. The sooner we do that and the better we do that, the more we have a clear business blueprint for what this is going to look like going forward. And we can guide the system integrator that much more effectively at a lower cost and a lower risk to the organization by having those business processes mapped early on. The third thing, and you could argue this should have been the first one because in my opinion, it's probably the most important, is having effective organizational change management. And again, this begins in that transformation readiness piece, which I just talked about as the first best practice, but it's worth calling out here too, because without effective organizational change management, without addressing resistance to change and making sure we've got executive alignment and our stakeholders are aligned, ensuring that we understand what the change impacts are to people and we help transition them through that process. Without any of that, this project has no chance of succeeding. So we've got to make sure we have effective organizational change management. I've done a lot of expert witness work, as has our team over the years. We've also done quite a bit of project recovery work for failed SAP implementations. And when we look at these failures and these lawsuits that we get called into to analyze or help fix, change management is almost always at the root cause of so much of what goes wrong. I'll give you an example. One thing we often hear is, our project failed or our project struggled because we customized too much. And on the surface, that makes total sense. You did customize too much, that added too much risk, and then you ran into a bunch of problems later on. But if you really look underneath the surface and peel back the onion, you start to realize that it was resistance to change all along. It was because you didn't have good change management. It led you to customize the software more than you would have otherwise. So in other words, if we get to the root cause of a lot of symptoms within these SAP transformations and these problems we see over the course of the industry globally, it often comes back to organizational change. So if we just get to that root cause and fix the root cause, we're not going to run into a lot of those other symptoms that we run into later on. Starting data migration early, that's really important, especially when you start talking about what we could do within S/4HANA as it relates to machine learning or predictive analytics and some of the reporting and BI tools you have. All that stuff's great, but it doesn't really matter if you can't get the data in the system, especially as it relates to your historic data. So making sure we've got clear or well-defined data and mapping to the new system, but also making sure that we've cleansed the data and that we have a clear vision for how we're going to bring that data over. Not just transactional stuff, but also your master data as well, making sure that we've got clear visibility to customers, for example, and that the customer data doesn't continue to reside in silos like it might now. What is our strategy to pull all that data together so that in the new system in S/4HANA, we have a global picture of what all of our customers are doing, what their purchasing patterns are, what our predictions for demand from those major customers are. All that stuff becomes that much easier if we have good data that we've brought over, especially on the master data side. And then fifth is to make sure we have well-orchestrated user acceptance testing. And I really consider this more of a business process and organizational change activity than I do a technology testing activity. Typically, by the time you get to user acceptance testing, you should have worked out all the technical bugs, and your system integrator should have made sure that you've got a solid technology in place. So what we focus on in this stage is really more the process and the organizational testing. The software probably works, but does it work for our business? Does it work for our people? And do our people understand how the software should be working? I mean, that's a lot of what you're working through in user acceptance testing. So it's not as simple as just checking off boxes and saying, yeah, the system works. It's more about figuring out, do we have clearly defined processes? Do we have the touch points outside the system mapped out? The integration points, if we're rolling out Ariba on the procurement side or success factors on the HCM side, do we have that integration worked out? And let's make sure we're testing everything cohesively, as well as things outside the SAP ecosystem, other third-party systems, manual processes, whatever it may be. Let's make sure we've got that all mapped out and then we're testing the full end-to-end cycle and people are comfortable with it. And then we're documenting whatever issues we have or identifying what kind of custom training we need to do or whatever the case may be. So well-orchestrated user acceptance testing is one of the 5 most important best practices as well. And then if we look at those, what we'll call honorable mentions, those things that didn't make the top 5, but they're really important. And I could have probably gone on for another few more slides of 20, 30, 40 more best practices. But here are some of the ones that you also want to think about as food for thought. One would be strong project governance and controls, making sure that you've got not just the system integrator managing their work stream well, but that overall program management. Make sure you've got a good QA mechanism in place, risk mitigation mechanism in place. Typically, system integrators aren't really good at that. They're focused so much on the software that they're not seeing the big picture of the risks as it relates to the people and the tech and the business processes. So that's an area where clients hire a third stage is to provide that third-party QA, that governance, almost an extension of the client's PMO or project management team, and bringing in that third-party perspective of identifying and mitigating risks and just helping manage the overall program, which includes the system integrators, but also includes a lot of other things. Your internal resources, you might have third-party systems you're integrating to or third-party resources outside of SAP. So tying that all together, identifying the risk, make sure we've got a clear plan, all that stuff's important. That also ties into the second honorable mention area, that strong project management. So just making sure you've got really good overall, I'll call it program management rather than project management, but making sure you've got good oversight of the entire program, all the resources, timeframes, milestones, internal, external resources, all that stuff needs to be managed really well. Don't over customize. Even if you do change management well, there may be a temptation to customize more than you probably should. You're probably going to customize something. So I don't think it's realistic to say you're going to do zero customization, but it's a slippery slope. And let's make sure we're only customizing what we really need to, because it's so important to our business. It's a competitive differentiator. It could be because there's a gap in the S/4HANA functionality and we really want to address that or need to address that now. Whatever it may be, just make sure that we're really diligent about customizing there. And that ties back to the first bullet around project governance and controls. If we have good project governance and controls, strong program management, chances are you'll address this one, but it's still something worth calling out. And then finally, we see this with a lot of clients that are in the process of implementing S/4HANA right now. There's a lot of gaps in S/4HANA. It just, it's a great product, but it just hasn't been out as long as ECC or R3 was back in the day. I started off as an SAP R3 consultant, and even by then it was a pretty mature product, and then it went on for a number of years after that. So if you think about all the R&D and effort that went into developing those legacy products, that's a huge amount of R&D and functionality and innovation that went into them. S/4HANA in some ways is super innovative. You've got the machine learning, the HANA backbone, some of the AI stuff, blockchain, all that stuff that they've innovated within the product. But there's also some gaps. There's some things that just haven't matured enough for some organizations. Still a very good product. A lot of companies are deploying it. They're continuing to improve it. But you really want to make sure you're poking holes in the system to find where those gaps are, because there are weaknesses with S/4HANA and any other system you might deploy, by the way. So we really need to figure out what are those gaps. How are we going to address it? Are we going to customize? Are we going to integrate to a third-party system? Are we going to have a manual process or workaround? But we just want to make sure we really hone in on that, because those gaps are the things that will create operational disruption at the time of go live. So we want to make sure we've got a good handle on that. So a few takeaways, things to remember. First of all, this is your project. It's not your system integrators. If you hire Third Stage to help with your project, it's not our project. It's your project. We're here to help. Your system integrator is here to help. But ultimately, you have to own it. And with that in mind, you've got to take control of this and do it the way you want to manage this. If you want to bring in a third party to help manage it, bring in the third party. If you want to bring in outside change management resources, bring in outside change management resources. I think system integrators, one of the problems with the industry right now in general is that system integrators have an outsized influence on how companies run these projects. And though they are experts in SAP, they're not experts in your business. Only you are, and only you know what's best for your organization. So that's very important. It's your project. It's no one else's. Recognize your system integrator is not a silver bullet. It's not a situation where you can outsource the entire project to them and they're going to handle all your needs. There's a number of areas that they're typically weak in, or they typically don't focus on just because it's not their core competency. But yet those gaps or those deficiencies are things that are extremely important to an overall transformation. So again, getting back to the first bullet, it's your project. Plug those gaps, make sure you've got the right resources that you need for this project. And then finally, traditional change management doesn't work. I recently posted an article that traditional organizational change management is dead. That the old school way of just building training plans, communication plans, stakeholder analysis, it's all important stuff, but it's just scratching the surface of what you really need to do. There's a very pragmatic side of change management that I think is missing in most cases, or in many cases, I should say. And so making sure you really have an innovative change management approach that's not just focused on let's train people to use the new system, let's communicate to them how this new system is going to be deployed and when they're going to be trained. You've got to go a lot deeper than that and get to a personal level and a customized level of helping employees understand what these new processes look like, how the technology fits in, what the non-SAP processes are going to look like, et cetera. So those are a few takeaways to keep in mind as well. And if you have further questions, feel free to reach out to me. I've included my phone number here. You can reach out to me via email as well. I encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel below. I also encourage you to download our definitive guide to a successful SAP S/4HANA transformation. That's something you can download by clicking the link below in the description field on the YouTube channel or on this YouTube video. And I hope you find that information useful. So thank you very much for watching. Hope this is helpful and look forward to chatting with you all soon. Take care.